Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're here for round 2 of my boring soldering up the board for this ST70. And again, this might not be everybody's cup of tea. And if you're old hat at all this stuff, you're probably not going to want to watch this video. I know that's saying that on the front end is going to have people just click stop, and that doesn't help my YouTube channel, but I just want to be honest that this probably isn't everybody's cup of tea. I know some of you guys say you find it relaxing just to watch these kind of videos, so hope some of you folks will enjoy that. And for you beginners that have never done circuit board work or whatever, maybe you'll pick up a tip or two, and maybe this will help give you the confidence to do this yourself. Or if you were going to do this, give you some ideas about, how you can be creative on assembling these things, that you don't have to put the caps on the top if you don't think that looks good, or if you think they look cool sitting up there, then you can put the caps on the top. Or you want to showcase the Mundorf caps, you can put them on the top, or you can hide them underneath. There's, you can make it look new school, old school, whatever. And again, this black circuit board I'm using isn't OG, and so that's not going to match the original look this amp had, but I just thought it looked better, so I'm using one. And those are the decisions you can make. So anyway, let's get busy working on this board. Okay, so we got our resistors put on the underside that we're going to be mounting under there. And let's come in here and just go around the horn. And again, you can prop the board up on the edge. I've just got a couple of little plastic boxes here that I've got the board sitting on, so the resistors can hang down as you're soldering, so they're not right up against the board. Now, if you were going to put these on the top, which I believe you could do, you would want to put them right up against the board, so you've got plenty of room with the spacers that space this board down underneath the chassis so the resistors don't touch the chassis. But that's one of the reasons that I'm soldering these down here on the ends, on the underside, so I can space them out a little bit to give them a little breathing room and not have a problem with them touching the chassis by doing so. And then these three here, I believe, are carbon resistors, those tan colored ones, and I just didn't want to have the mismatched look of the blue and the tan resistors, so I want to put these guys underneath purely for aesthetic reasons. Hey, and you may like the combo look. Now this one here, you can see it's underneath the edge, so I think it's a good idea to put that one on the underside for the same reasons that I put the metal film resistors on the underside on each end. And then one of the things that I always do after I clip the leads is I flip the board over and look on the other side and make sure I see a little bit of solder coming through the hole, so that I know that I didn't just like pile some solder up on top of the joint on the top. And there we go. And then we got these little guys on the underside. And I can definitely see some solder coming through the hole. Now if you don't see some and you want to just be extra sure that you've got a good connection, there's nothing wrong with coming through on this other side and like just heating up a little bit and just putting a little dab of solder like right there. Just ensure you've got a good joint. If you don't see any solder coming through the hole, and that way you know you're not going to have like a cracked solder joint in the future, because you got plenty of solder. All of those that came through, yep, that's all good. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put this diode in, and very important that this is oriented correctly. And you can see it's marked where the stripe is on this end. So you want to make sure that you put the stripe towards this square hole. You can see how that one hole square, this end's round. You want to put the stripe like that. Because if not, you end up with positive bias on the grid instead of negative bias on the grid. And as soon as you power the amp up, all the tubes will red plate and nobody will be happy. So the same thing. I'm going to stand that up just a little proud of the board like that. And then solder that guy in. You really don't want to heat these guys up any more than you have to. So you want to have a nice hot clean tip when you're soldering semiconductors, and go in, heat up, solder, and get out. And looks like I partially soldered up that hole right next to it. But if you do, don't stress. Just get a little solder wick, come in and clean the hole out just like that, because we got to put a wire in there. So there we go. That got that all done. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to put the tube sockets in. So what I normally do with those is put them all in place. Like so. And then hold them as you flip the board over like that. So they're all nice and even. I prop the little lid up here on the edge to kind of hold them down flat. You can put anything over there you want. That's just put a little bit so it balances. And now normally what I do is I'll solder 2 pins. And these you want to make sure you get them good and warm and really pump some solder in there. Then hold the board down as it cools. Then do the one diagonally from it. And then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll do that pin. We'll do this one. don't pick the board up because the tube socket's not soldered on and it'll just fall off. Hold that down. And the reason we do two at a time is then you come around and you look and you make sure that your tube sockets are straight. And if you got any question that they are, it's not a bad idea to just pop some tubes in them and see if the tubes look like they're straight. And these aren't the tubes we're going to be using, but these are kind of extra long tubes. They'll really show us if we've got any of these tube sockets like crooked. And they're all three fully seated. And then we look like that. And they are straight. And they're straight. So we know we've got our tube sockets in straight. And so we can come back in and solder the rest of those pins in place, knowing that when we get done, tubes are going to be straight. Obviously, they could be all cattywampus crooked and it wouldn't matter. The tubes would still work, but if we're going to the trouble of like getting black tube sockets and polishing them and cutting the extra off to make it look nice, we obviously don't want crooked tubes. And so then we just come in and again, you want to put some pretty good heat on it. And then once it starts melting the solder, go ahead and shove about a ½ inch or so of solder into the joint so you get a really nice, good connection. Because this is supporting the tube as well, and when you're, if you're rolling tubes or pulling tubes out to replace them or whatever, you don't want it to crack one of these solder joints in the future and end up with a problem with your amplifier. Kind of crushed that resistor down a little bit when we were sticking that tube in. You can always come back in and straighten up resistors if they get smushed over from working on the board. Hopefully we won't be doing any more pressing in of things that would cause that until the board's installed in the amp. And these you definitely want to see the solder come out the other side of the hole, so you know it's physically supporting the tube socket. I'm going to turn it over, and then as you can see, we got a nice flow of solder on both sides of the board, and these are really nicely mechanically connected to the board, since they're going to be holding up the tube socket. Just look around and make sure all the pins have a nice little mound on both sides of the board like that, so you know you got a good mechanical and electrical connection with the tube. So next we're going to get our capacitors all put on that are going on the underside of the board and come back and solder them in place. Okay, now we're ready to solder these caps on the underside of the board, and these are the upgrade 100 UF Nikon caps, which, you know, I think it's well worth spending the extra couple of bucks to get some better filter caps for the board. And originally the caps would have been on this side of the board, but I feel like it's a mistake or not a good idea to be putting caps where you have tubes radiating heat onto the side of the cap. Is it going to kill them? No. But you can put them on the underside of the board and just get them away from the heat radiating off the tubes. And, you know, aesthetically, if you wanted the caps on the top, again, it's not going to kill them, but yeah. The other thing you need to be very careful of is make sure that you put the positive lead into the square hole or the square pad that's marked with a plus. If you put these in backwards, they will blow up as soon as you power up the amp. And then the thing to note on these two caps that are the filter caps for the negative bias, that the positive leg of the cap is going to ground, which I know is kind of backwards, but yeah, it's negative voltage, not positive voltage. And so make sure you put them in the right orientation. And we're going to come in here and solder these guys in. Now these you won't be able to inspect the other side to make sure that you got a good solder joint. So make sure you keep the tip clean. It's probably worth dabbing it in your little sponge cleaner thing after each cap. Because a bad solder joint on a cap is going to be likely just a weird noise. It's not going to be like where the circuit doesn't work. It's going to be really hard to diagnose where the problem is. I had a phono stage one time that I'm not sure what was actually wrong with it, but finally ended up just throwing it in the trash can because it had a weird hum in it and I couldn't figure out what was causing it. And I don't know if it was a bad board or a bad cap or, yeah, drove me crazy. Finally I just decided life's too short. Threw that thing in the trash can and moved on with my life. And it easily could have been a bad solder joint on one of the caps, even though I went back through and reflowed every joint. And let's hope that I never see that again. I honestly think it was a bad board, but there we go. Then we're going to trim these off. And we're going to trim these ones that are underneath the edge of the chassis, maybe a little extra close, just so you don't have to worry about those touching the chassis when they're bolted down. And that's why you need these flush cutters, so you can get them nice and tight up against. Now, one thing you can do, and this is another highly anal retentive thing for aesthetics only, once you cut them off, you can come back through and just do a little reflow like that, and it makes a pretty little mound of solder instead of having the cutoff part, and it just looks a little neater. So anyway, got the caps all installed. Now we're into installing these guys. So let me get these put in and I'll show you how to solder those on. Well, this looked like a good place to stop this segment, and we're rolling right along. We're getting close to getting this thing finished up. Still got some other stuff to solder on here, but I want to cut this up into digestible pieces. And again, this isn't sponsored by Tubes for Hi-Fi. I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. All the videos that I make on this board, that I'm just a customer, bought the board from them. Looks like a well-made piece. They've got a good reputation. They've been making these VTA boards for a long time. I know when you get online, people are like, man, people hate on these 12AU7 tubes. And honestly, I just don't get it. I think they sound good. And, you know, there may be, I don't know. We may try a different voltage amplification tube, the center one. But I'm going to see how it sounds with these 12AU7s, because I've had good luck with them. And there's certain 12AU7 tubes that definitely sound better than other ones. For new production, those electroharmonic gold pins sound good. The standard pins don't sound good. I mean, they sound pretty bad. And so I can imagine if people had used those, they would go, wow, this sounds awful. But again, you put the right 12AU7 tube in an amp, and it can totally change what it sounds like. And I think it's one of those tubes that you really have to use a good tube for them to work well. And I hate to say this because people go buy them all up, but I'll share this with you guys because maybe a lot of people aren't still watching the video, so I can sneak this by without the market going crazy. The clear top RCA, the old school ones, they're pretty cheap on eBay. Those things sound really good. I kind of been buying them up as I see them on eBay at a good prices to use in my color preamps, because I went through a bunch of 12AU7s trying to figure out what sounds good, and those got some magic to them. And so I'm probably going to be trying those in here as well. And then probably going to be using the JJ EL34Ls for the output tubes. I think I can put KT66s in this. I know you can put KT77s in. I have to look at the heaters. I want to be careful because this is a short stack. Like there's a short, medium, and a tall stack power transformer. And this has got the short stack one. But I'm going to be doing stuff to the power supply, which hopefully will make the transformer a little happier. And hey, it may run hot. People say they do, but as long as it doesn't die, I'm happy. I'm just going to make sure I don't overwork it. And that's the other thing. Somebody was saying that, oh my God, you're putting 3 tubes in where there used to be 2. You're going to cook the transformer. Well, these draw 0.3 amps, and the 2 original tubes draw almost a half an amp each. So these 3 tubes use less heater amperage than the original did. And so I don't think that's going to be a problem. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this slow content. I know some of you do. If you do, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters. And we will see you for the next video. Have a nice day.